This program contains material that may not be suitable for children. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. Yeah, so between his death and the funeral was 10 days. So it felt like a really long time. And a couple days before the actual funeral, we had a family and friends viewing and like a goodbye. And then we had the memorial service, which they actually brought his body to the memorial service. We had it at the church in Tacoma. And then the next morning we had the burial service. So by the time we had the burial service, his body had just gone through a lot. 10 days, autopsy, the length of time, and then he was out for a viewing, put back, and then out for another viewing. And that first viewing was a couple hours, and then the second viewing was like 3-4 hours, the memorial. And then by the time we got to the burial, I was like, man, we just want to put this guy to rest, man, he deserves to be like, just it's time. And so in that sense, I personally was ready for the funeral. And then like the family and friends viewing was so like sweet. It was very sweet. Got to say goodbye, got to share like some of the like sillier, goofier stories, and like just the more just the funnier memories. It's really hard to like take a person and their whole life and all that they were and all that they did and all of their potential and just like put on a piece of paper and say goodbye to them, But there was a lot of like beautiful things that people shared about him, and like it was just a really good time. I think you spoke. Did you speak at the funeral?
I don't think I did. I don't remember. I don't remember doing it. I remember at the family viewing, I think it was you encouraging me to go say something, and I was too scared. I was 17 at this time, and I regret not doing it. I really do. And every person that had passed away after this, I made sure I spoke, because I did like always think back to them like, man, like I think in that time you don't want to be vulnerable, I think, in front of others too, and just show your emotions. It's really difficult. But at the same time, it does feel like almost like your last chance to honor them publicly in that kind of setting. It really is your only chance, and obviously you can continue to honor them as you continue your life, but it's almost like your last words, or even just your impression. And I know it's healing also to others to hear, because I remember hearing everyone else's, and it's so nice to hear everyone's stories, to hear their relationship with Nick, their perception, right? Their just different experiences that they've had. And so, that's something that I wish I did. I had to, at least at the family viewing, when I had the opportunity.
Oh my goodness. And I remember he had a best friend when we were all like in one friend group. He had his only like very best friend, there was only one. And after that relation kind of, they didn't get to hang out as much. They got married, and that one best friend like continued to be his best friend, his only best friend, I think that person, I think they assumed that now he has other friends, now he has, a different life. Well, I called him up one day and I'm like, where are you? Like, why aren't you here? Why haven't you come? Like, have you heard what happened? Yes, I heard. And I was like, so where are you? Like, you were such a huge part of his life. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that, like, I thought like it was in the past and he moved on. Like, from my perspective, I was like, that's so rude. Like, anytime that I was best friends with somebody, if they die, like, no matter if I'm close to them or not anymore, like, I'm still going to show up. I'm still going to be there. I'm still going to pay respect to at least that portion of their life that I had an influence over, an influence of, and the influence that they had on me. And sure enough, he came through. They came over. They just sat and chatted with us, and they were really respectful. And but sometimes people need that kick in the butt. They need that kick in the butt of like, hey, like, or I guess more so that validation that they meant a lot to that person.
I think that's what I was thinking, because I don't think, I wonder if this person was just more thinking like how you're saying they've moved on. Maybe I'm not needed there, because it's such a balance. Like, there's the people that how you were saying that were coming that maybe shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
But they're the people who you want there, the people that are close that you know they were a big part of their life, and they might be feeling like, oh, I need to give the family space. I need to step away in the situation.
Yeah.
So
looking back now, I'm so glad that I found him, and he ended up being like, part of the funeral. He ended up being like, I guess that kind of gave him some validation of like, no, like you were his best friend, and even though you guys separated, like he didn't have a friend like you afterwards, and like, and this guy, like he would come over to our house all the time, and like even like I remember one time he had like an interview, and he like came over before the interview because he just wanted the validation from Nick that he looked good, and like he was, their family was an extension of our family for some time, and it was just a little disappointing to not see those faces where you're like, man, like this person meant so much to him, this family meant so much. Yeah. And then after that conversation, like his whole family came to the funeral. Parents, like the brothers, like it was amazing. They paid their respects. I think they sang at the funeral. Anyways, but the funeral itself was a beautiful day. We sat in the front row. I think, did you sit in the front row too?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
We sat in the front row.
Somewhere very close to the front.
And again, like the gruesomeness, like the beauty, but also the gruesomeness of death. Like it was a beautiful service and everything, but the guy in the casket and the body in the casket did not match the guy in the photos and the guy that we knew. Like his body had been through so much at that point. He needed to be laid to rest. Like definitely doesn't like feel like my brother, doesn't look like my brother. Like, first of all, made me dislike open casket memorials or open casket proceedings. But secondly, made me realize like, man, like that's not the person that we love and know, and we just need to bite the bullet and put this body to rest.
Yeah, I do remember thinking, because it looked nothing like him, just it gave me such confidence that he's not there, like he's in heaven right now, and it was just such a. You probably had that feeling when you saw his body the first time. I hadn't had that experience, so when I did see him for the first time at the viewing, it was the second I looked at him, I was shocked at how different he looked. Shocked. I remember looking at his finger, hand. He had a tattoo of a cross. Yes. And that was the only thing that like proved to me that was him.
Really?
Because it did not look like him to me, and I was like, okay, I guess it is because it's a tattoo in the same place. Yeah. But I knew because like I could just tell like that's not him. He's in heaven. That just the what he was in temporarily, right? The casing, the vessel that he was in, and that's no longer like. I think that was the first time me realizing that like the
our
spirit
bodies aren't ours.
It's not. The spirit and the body are not the same. You are not your body, and just that separation was so clear when I had seen him. Like, oh, I know for sure he's in heaven. He's not in this box.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I remember even preparing, like I went to the funeral home with, so basically, okay, so the process is they take the body to the morgue, the medical examiner does the examination, and then they place him back in the morgue, but they only have capacity for like a couple days. So they can't keep the body in the morgue the whole week until you're ready to put them to rest. They don't have that kind of capacity, certainly not in Tacoma. So when we chose the cemetery, and the funeral home, he actually got transferred over to the funeral home. And that's where he waited until like the viewing and then the memorial and then the funeral ultimately. The whole funeral process, the whole like funeral proceeding is so awkward for the family because you just like you have to deal with the person's body after they're gone, and like all that you know them as, but it's just a body at that point. And like the laying the body to rest is such a just like a disappointing process, like from picking the casket to dressing them up and like somebody's like putting on their shirt, like it's just so awkward. Do you think between so he had a memorial service and then he had the burial service on 2 different days? Yes.
Which one was harder for you to go through, like from your opinion?
The friends and family viewing, I think, was like awesome. Like I thought it was really calm and peaceful and just like kind of took away the trauma of like seeing him again at the funeral with 1,000 people. So it like really prepared us mentally of like what he will look like, what the casket's gonna look like, what he's dressed as. So it's not so like dramatic when you see him and then like there's thousands of people, you know. And there was like 1,200 people at his memorial. There was a lot. It was a lot. Like the place was full. And that's a big church. So when we got to the funeral portion of it, it felt like, it didn't feel like it was for us anymore. It felt like it was for people now to process. Because we've had a moment we've had 10 days to process and to think about it and to cry about it. And so by the time we got to the actual memorial service, before he was buried, it was actually more like, this is how we want to present like his life. This is how we want to respect and honor his, you know, his time. It was more for like the cousins and the friends and the people who weren't involved in that, friends and family, you know?
So people who knew him but just weren't as close.
By that point, I think I was personally ready for like for the burial. I think I had like, it had been 9 or 10 days of kind of just like limbo of like just waiting for this thing, for this funeral, for this event. You're just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. You just wanted a little bit of closure by that point. I just wanted to like try to heal now and move on and try to like figure out what life now looks like with them out of your life. He died on the 10th, October 10th, and then October 20th was his funeral, and then October 21st was his birthday, which was a Sunday. And then I remember we got together again on Sunday, and we had like, because he was planning they were planning a birthday party for him anyways. We came together, we had breakfast before church, and then we just had a little birthday party for him. We missed him for sure, you know. Those days were so wonderful because our whole family dropped everything and spent every day together. All of our siblings, no matter what happened, we had this like project. We had this project that we were working on together. And we just dropped our lives. Like,
I think another like blessing that we definitely don't take for granted is that at that time we were all living in the same area. Everyone lived in the same state. At this point now,
two are in Texas, one is in Florida.
And then so everyone's more spread out now, but at the time of this happening, everyone was within, from the furthest to the close, like probably within an hour, 45 minutes maybe, was about from 45. The furthest furthest people apart. Because in those moments, like when you find out like time is of essence, like you said, that 30-minute drive felt like a couple hours. Like all you're thinking about is, I want to be there, I want to be there, I want to be there. And
I can only imagine like people who have to take a flight. Like that's a whole nother trauma that I haven't experienced yet, and I hope I won't, but like having to take a flight. I know I have a cousin that had to fly in from Italy, and then I have like other people that we know that had to fly in like 5, 6, 7 hour flights, you know, last minute flights to because they were traveling or because they just weren't in town. And like to have to do all that surrounded by people who don't know what you're going through. It's like they don't understand. They have no idea that you've just lost somebody, you know, important to you and close to you, and you have to travel alongside them and deal with all the things they have to deal with and wait and buckle up and go through safety, and you're just like, hurry up. I have somewhere to be, you know.
During the in between those 10 days, you said everyone's together, everyone's planning for this one thing, right? You're all like anticipating this service and the burial, and all your energies are going towards that. After all these services are done, it was his birthday. We had the get together, and then after that, there's nothing to look forward to, and you're not planning for anything. You're not doing. So how was that? Is that when the processing really started?
Yes, some of the important things that I thought were important to do quickly were like go through his clothes, give away what we could give away, you know, toss what we can toss, and leave, like I said, just a few mementos. And I think it was important to do it quickly with Nadia, because the longer that you wait, the more of like a project it becomes. And then I can't throw this away. This is the last that I have of them. This is the last connection that I have. And we did end up doing it quickly. Like, I think it was within the week of his funeral. I think it was like that Monday or Tuesday that we went through his things, packed it up, kept a few things that we wanted, and just like rip off the Band-Aid. But being around family for like so many consecutive days, it was helpful to see like, all right, we're all going through this. Like, it's not just you. We're all missing this person. We're all like right there with you.
One thing I did want to honor about Naj is that during that time, like, it never felt like we weren't welcome there around to grieve with her. I do remember like a lot of times even coming over, like, already this is after those 10 days. This is already in that the post funeral and all of that, and actually having like in the processing period and all of that. I remember coming over and like we would sleep over there sometimes. We would just spend time with her, and I don't ever remember feeling like she wanted us to leave or we're not welcome or anything like that. And a lot of that was also healing for me to be close to her. It was just nice because you're processing with them in a way. And she allowed us to be close by, which I really I am so happy that she allowed us to be close and to be with Nikita too, and all. And and just be there. And
I just learned a lot about grief in that situation, because there's a lot of things that I didn't like. It was so strange to my world, and I hadn't ever gone through that, where I was like, oh wow, like this is how it goes, like this is what people go through. But at the same time, it's like, oh, like I will never do that, or like I now know how this and this feels. Like if I'm ever in this situation again, or if somebody that I know and love is in this situation, like I will do this and I won't do this. And those were made very clear in one experience. And then for us to now have like multiple experiences of death, like that was the biggest one, and that was the that was the first one. The initial one. After that, now like hearing it, like it's if somebody passes away, like it's still shocking, it's still sad, it's still like a disbelief, but it's not as like groundbreaking for me now. I feel like I'm a little numb to like hearing if something happened to somebody. I'm kind of like, oh wow, like now this family's now gonna go through that. Like my cousin passed away recently, and my heart went out to the family, because now they're going through what we went through 6 years ago, and now all the questions are arising, and now all of this and all of that, and especially when you don't know why they died, and people are asking you, and like people are speculating, and people are gossiping or whatever. It's like, man, like we knew that firsthand because we didn't know. And then when we found out, it wasn't a pretty fact. When we found out that it was an overdose of certain like multiple things that weren't lethal on its own, the combination of them were lethal to him. So when we found that out, that was it was 3 months later. 3 months later, it's like that Band-Aid came right off again. And all of those questions are like, man, what was going on in his life? Why didn't I reach out? Why didn't he reach out? What could have been done? How did we not notice? All these new questions come up. How often? How many times? How recent was this relapse? How deep could it have gone? How deep did it go? Who gave it to him? Who in his circle knew about this? Like all different questions came up, different. And it was just like, how could you? Like, how could you, knowing what you came from? Like, you had other options. Like, yes, your life was stressful. Yes, your life was tough. We didn't know all these things. And I think the anger came out for me. I was just like, man, like, no, we have to go through this because you made a choice, And like the anger came out, and like the questioning came out, and just like the denial, and just kind of like, who did this to him? Who gave it to him? Who was the last person who saw him? Who passed this poison to somebody that I love, you know. I think that was the first realization of how ugly death is, and how ugly drugs are, and how ugly addiction is,
and how permanent
your
decisions are.
And obviously in the position that we found him in, he was on his knees, and it makes you wonder, was he crying out to God in his last moments? What did his last moments look like? Did he have a moment to just like talk to God and say, hey, this is taking my life? And like those questions just come back up, you know, like when we found out, like for me, it was like, what did your last moments look like? What did you feel? Did you know you were dying? Did you know that you need help? Like, did you know that you were about to meet your creator, you know? And it was like, I'm glad that 3 months went by because it wasn't so fresh, but it was just different once we found out exactly what happened. And it was a surprise to us all when our family met. I think we met at your house. When we met and, you know, we discussed it, like, it was kind of just like compassion more so than anything. It was kind of just like, man, I wish we knew. I wish we had it, things were different. And but also like mixed feelings, you know, like I wish things would be different. But also like we know that God knew what he's doing. We knew that God knew when to draw that boundary of like, no, this is it. You know, there wasn't any moment that I like question his salvation. I don't question his salvation at all. I think in our Russian community, Slavic community, it's common to like question like, oh, did this person die unsaved, or they're going to be in hell the rest of Never, because the blood of Jesus is stronger than addiction. The blood of Jesus, there's nothing that will cause Jesus to come back and have to die again. It's already been done. So, you know, for someone to like slip and fall, I don't think it's final for them to slip and fall and stay that way. I think that the blood of Jesus covered him, and that he was a son of God, and that it can't be taken away because you make a mistake. I don't believe that his salvation was lost because he accepted Jesus as his Lord and Savior.
Very clearly.
Very clearly.
For everyone to see. And how old was he at that time? Do you remember?
I think he was 18. I think. And we started ministry together, and it was so obvious his heart for people. And so I don't like it. It doesn't go away just like that. No, it doesn't go away because you did a sin and that's it. You're done. You know, we were never good enough in the first place. Like we were never good enough. And so it's like, if I wasn't good enough then, what makes me good enough now? You know, like I can never be good enough.
I can never earn my salvation.
And that's the point of it.
Point. Of grace.
You know, and so for me, it was just like, all right, like, oh, you know, we'll see each other again. We can talk about things. He can answer some tough questions that I have for him. At the end of the day, addiction is tough for people who have had encounters with drugs. Recovery is lifelong. And you have to be so on guard with your pressures and the pressures that are coming into your life, whether it's financial, familial, business, whatever pressures he had, marriage, new child, new company, new this, new that, new home. He just bought a house, just remodeled his house. All those pressures. When you're recovering from addiction, you have to be so much more in tune with those and know when you feel like you're reaching that edge, you know, and just take a break. Hey, I need you to take a break from this pressure from my work. I need to take a break from this pressure of my new house and my new remodel. I just have so much compassion for him because he just had so much going on. He had the world going on. And, but we all do. Like, who doesn't, you know? And I have mixed emotions. If you were to get answers on 3 things, like what would be your first curiosity?
Ooh, I actually never thought about this.
I have.
I know, I can tell, I definitely, there would be, I think there is definitely curiosity, kind of how you mentioned about what led him to that area, because just like you said, no one was expecting it. Everything seemed fine. I think that was very eye-opening, because it shows someone might be going through something that you have no idea whatsoever, right? That they're going through it. I would be curious, just to know. I don't think that's something I would like waste a question on if I had 3. I don't know.
Okay, fine, you have 5.
If I got to ask him right now, I think if I got to ask him 3 questions, I'd just be curious how he's doing in heaven. I'm sure he's doing much better than we are down here. It's interesting because when you go through someone passing, you do start thinking about heaven a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's something I am grateful for, because we should, as believers, we should be heaven-sided all the time, right? And even like through our grief, we grieve differently than those people who have no faith. Yeah. Because we know there's still, like, in the end, there's still hope. We know that he's not in that body. It definitely brings your mind to heaven, and I think just knowing that he's doing okay is so comforting. But I guess if I got to ask him right now, just like, what are you up to up there? That would be kind of cool.
I would feel like I have so much to tell him.
Yeah,
because since he died,
yeah,
I got married.
Yeah.
Divorced. Yeah. Married again.
Yeah.
Moved across the country to Texas.
Yes.
COVID happened.
That's true.
He never got to experience
That's why I think he's much happier.
The pleasure of COVID and how fun that was. Yeah. And
your business expanded.
Oh my goodness. Like he would be so excited.
He'd be so
like
proud of you.
I have a new location. We're breaking records. Like it's crazy. Like the growth that my mom has had as a business owner. Yeah. I mean, he saw us as business owners, but seeing it now would be like, wow. Yeah. But yeah, I would just be like, look what I've been up to,
excited,
you know, and like, I have stepchildren. I want to have more children, you know, and like, just kind of like all those things that like I haven't got to share with him, and where he would be.
Yeah, I think one thing that his passing specifically has taught me, because I think every person that I've experienced loss with learned something slightly different from the Lord, and I think from his specifically was just the message of grace. I think that was him specifically, and like that was the first time me processing myself. Does someone, would you still go to heaven if you sin? Like not understanding grace very well. I think that was the first time I had to process that, and understanding that once you are born again, you sinning doesn't take away your status as a child of God. And for some reason, we understand that when it comes to small sins, because we know we've all sinned after we were born again. We all know we've messed up after, and for some reason we don't have issues with that. But when it comes to these detrimental sins, right, these bigger ones, life-ending sins, that's when we start questioning. And I think his life and death have really solidified my understanding of grace, and even seeing grace in his life specifically too, of someone like knowing if he can be born again, anyone can, right? Like having a dramatic life change too. I think those were the big lessons I learned from his life and his passing, which is great. It was the same message in his passing too, that God's grace is sufficient. Yeah,
and there's so many stories of grace in his life. I mean, this kid got shot at. He had a bullet through his stomach. Like, I nursed it back to health. FYI. Bullet through his stomach. He had alcohol poisoning, and he passed out on a snowy lawn on a snowy night. Almost died. He had his stomach pumped. He had like hypothermia. Almost died. And he was like 17, I think, at the time. Underage, definitely. And then the amount of like crime that they did, like they stole from people, they stole from houses, like the amount of crime that he put his life at risk, like shows so much grace that he's gone through, even through addiction. Any day that you do drugs, you're playing with death. You're playing a game of death. And there are just so many situations where he had God's grace all over him. It was just so evident in his life, and honestly, like it was such a pleasure to do ministry with him. And those are always gonna be the best days of my life. We had this wonderful friends group, and we did ministry together, and we talked about God. We made an effort in people's lives in Seattle in the homeless community, and we fed 100, 150, 200 people every weekend as like 17, 18-year-olds rolling up on a church van, pulling out, soup and whatever else, Alfredo and whatever we made that week, all these kids rolling up like with all this food. And like, it really developed, and we'll go into this, but it really developed who I am, my passion for cooking. I now have 3 restaurants. It developed, my ability to cook for a lot of people. And then it also gave me the ability to like see past the homeless person, the dirty, weird, shaking drug person. It really helped us see like, oh, that's Bob, oh, that's Carl, oh, that's, that's so-and-so, this is her story, and it was such a powerful time, and Nick, like, he was so good about it. He would, like, there was a guy that came to us, and he's just, like, high off his mind, and he's just, like, oh, like, all dirty, muddy. The first thing Nick does, cleans him, wipes his pants, cleans him up, gets him some food, just the hands of God, the hands of Jesus. And there were so many situations where I just looked at my brother and I'm like, yeah, like that's my brother. Like that's God. That's God's work in him. That's God's grace in him. And I'm just so impressed. At that point, I had never like walked away from God. I was always in the church at that point. But seeing him walk away from God and come back, I was like, man, I am nowhere near his relationship with God. I am nowhere near his understanding of grace. I am nowhere near like the depth of what he's seen and the depth of grace for him. And that was like super eye-opening for me, because he understood the depths of it. He understood the crime, the bad that he's done. And he understood what he was saved from. Wow. Where for me, I was like, well, I always stayed in church. I took baptism when I needed to. I didn't do anything horrible at that point. I didn't do anything bad.
Like the prodigal son story with the stain, right? The older sibling.
But I will say that I didn't feel entitled to like God's grace more than him. Like I felt like if God's grace was for anyone, like I'm glad that he got it. Like I'm glad that he got it, because he went from not even being able to like write his own name to like write these beautiful sermons and these beautiful poems and these beautiful stories. The renewal of the mind that happened for him was more than I've ever seen ever in my life.
As like a difference, right? The difference, you haven't seen that before.
Because this kid didn't even finish 8th grade.
Wow.
In 8th grade, he went to Kentwood High School in Kent. For one day in 9th grade, he brought a knife and a lighter and was smoking in the back of the porta potty or portable, and he got expelled. Oh, wow. He never even finished. He finished like at best 8th grade.
Oh wow.
Yeah, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th. Yeah, none of that. None of that. And for him to go like from illiterate bad boy to writing these sermons that were profound and deep and really smart, like really well thought out and really intellectual, was amazing to see. Amazing. The grief process is not, it does feel very isolating, but you're not alone. You might feel like, oh, I'm struggling harder than they are today. Everybody's moved on and I haven't. My world stopped and everybody's fine. No, it doesn't mean that everybody's fine. It means that you should lean in to each other, and then there are times when you're like, well, everybody looks like they're having such a good time. I don't want to bring this up and dampen the mood. Or like, different situations of like, oh, I'm always so sad and everyone's so happy. It's like, no, like they have their moments too, and you can't let the enemy just convince you that you're the only one going through this, because it's not true. You're not isolated. You're not the only one. We choose to like be in that pity place until we choose not to, and so really reaching out to like the people around you and your family and like the people who are also going through that is huge. It's like everything. You know, reaching out to each other, checking in. Hey, how are you feeling today? How are you doing today? Like, where are you at on your grief scale? Like, where are the waves right now? Are they calm or are they roaring? You know, did you see something? Did you hear something? Did you smell something that you reminded them of you or you of them? And or did you see somebody that looks like them on the street and your first reaction was like, oh, you know, that happens so much. I feel like after somebody passes, you just like end up seeing them everywhere. And you're just like,
I know.
Oh. You know, and those little triggers, like they're just, they suck.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that you have been such a good example of that person who brings up those conversations even, and like it through grief, doing it so well, and not being afraid to bring up those conversations. And how do you feel, and how are you doing right now in this time, and all of that. So I just wanted to say thank you for being an example. And I see all the advice that you gave. I see that you've done it so well through these situations, and like not being scared of opening up discussion. This podcast.
This podcast is one of those where we are on our phones multiple hours a day sometimes, you know, like we scroll and then there's sometimes where you just like come across a video and they're talking about real stuff and you're just like, I really needed to hear that today. Like that really needed to be in my newsfeed today. And sometimes you just get a different perspective, or sometimes it brings you to a headspace of like, wow, you know, like this and this happened, or you know, my perspective shifted on this. And because those people put those out there, like that have affected my life. But for tonight, say goodbye.
We'll give you a hug. Yay.
Oh.